The reconnaissance probe was small, no bigger than a cargo crate, and it moved fast. It crossed the distance between the cradle of law and the edge of the quarantine zone in less than a day, its sensors recording everything. When it arrived, it slowed and began transmitting a live feed back to the council chamber. Every delegate in the amphitheater watched in silence as the feed filled the enormous display screen above the central platform. The image showed the human fleet. 22 ships arranged in a tight defensive pattern, hanging in the black like a fist made of metal. The ships were ugly. There was no other word for it. They were thick and heavy and covered in armor plating that looked like it had been beaten and repaired 1,000 times. There were no elegant curves, no smooth lines, no glowing engine arrays like the ones on Solari warships. These ships looked like they had been built by people who expected to be hit and did not care about looking good while they took it. A Mora analyst spoke from the lower tier of the chamber. Their hulls are incredibly dense. Multiple layers of composite armor over what appears to be a self-repairing structural lattice. These vessels are designed to absorb massive damage and continue operating. War machines, Ambassador Lytique said from his seat, his mandibles clicking. Built for nothing but war. Built for survival, Counselor Drea corrected quietly. On the bridge of the Resolute, Sam Ortiz spotted the probe on his sensor display. He marked its position and reported it to Captain Danny Voss. Small object, Captain. No weapons signature. Passive sensors only. It is watching us. Danny looked at the blip on the screen. Katie Lang stood beside him, arms crossed. It could be a targeting beacon, Katie said. They send a probe first. Get our position locked. Then follow up with weapons fire. Could be, Danny said. We should destroy it. Danny shook his head slowly. No. Someone sent that probe because they want to see us. Right now, they are watching. The first thing they learn about us will be what we do in this moment. If we destroy that probe, we teach them that we are exactly what they think we are. Katie looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. So what do we teach them instead? Danny turned to Ensign Leo Park. Leo, broadcast on all open frequencies. Start with a mathematical sequence. Prime numbers. Let them know we are intelligent. Then send a greeting in English with the full linguistic cipher that Dr. Finch put together. Make it polite. Leo's fingers moved across his console. How polite, Captain? Very polite. Like your mother is watching. Leo almost smiled. He composed the message and sent it out into the dark. A string of prime numbers, followed by a simple greeting. We are the people of Earth. We come in peace. We wish to talk. Hours passed. The bridge crew waited. Danny sat in his command chair and drank cold coffee from a metal cup. Katie reviewed fleet readiness reports. Sam ran system checks on the navigation array. Leo kept his eyes on the communication console, watching for any response among the thousands of alien signals flooding the open frequencies. Then it came. A single transmission, tight beam, aimed directly at the Resolute. Leo sat up straight. Captain, I have a response. It is in a language I do not recognize, but the translation cipher is processing it. He paused as the computer worked. It says, you are instructed to hold your current position. Do not advance. A diplomatic envoy will be dispatched to your location. Any hostile action will be met with immediate force. Danny read the translation on his own screen. Not exactly warm and friendly. They are scared, Katie said. Good. Scared people are careful. Angry people are not. Danny leaned back. Send a reply. Tell them we will hold position and we welcome their envoy. 2 days later, a small, sleek shuttle emerged from a corridor of folded space and approached the human fleet. It was a beautiful craft, silver and flowing, like something designed by artists rather than engineers. It looked completely out of place next to the scarred bulk of the Resolute. Danny ordered the shuttle escorted to the main docking bay. He put on a clean uniform, the best one he had, and told Katie and Dr. Laura Finch to meet him at the airlock. Laura Finch was a woman in her late 50s, with gray-streaked hair and calm, intelligent eyes. She had spent 30 years studying the fragments of alien language found on the quarantine buoys, building translation models from almost nothing. She was not a soldier. She was a historian and a linguist, and she was possibly the only human alive who could actually speak to an alien being. The airlock opened, and Senior Envoy Tarek stepped aboard the Resolute. Tarek was Solari, tall and thin with pale gray skin, and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. He wore formal diplomatic robes of deep blue fabric, and he moved with the careful grace of someone who had spent a lifetime in rooms full of dangerous people. He was considered one of the finest negotiators in the Galactic Council, and he had volunteered for this mission because no one else would take it. He stopped just inside the airlock and looked around. The corridor was metal and functional, lit by simple white lights. But the walls were not bare. Someone had painted a mural along the entire length of the hallway. It showed a green valley under a blue sky, with a river running through it, and mountains in the distance. Flowers grew along the painted riverbank. It was beautiful. Tarek stared at the mural for a long time. His briefing files had described humans as the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. He had expected cold metal and weapons racks. He had not expected art. A crew member walked past and nodded to Tarek with a small smile. "Welcome aboard," she said. Tarek followed his escorts to a conference room on the upper deck. Danny Voss was waiting for him, standing beside a long table, with Katie Lang on his right and Laura Finch on his left. Danny extended his hand. Tarek looked at it uncertainly. "It is a greeting," Laura explained gently. "You take his hand in yours and shake it briefly. It means we are glad you are here." Tarek reached out and took Danny's hand. The human's grip was firm and warm. Tarek noted the calluses on Danny's palm, the roughness of a hand that had done real work. He also noted that Danny's eyes were steady and open. There was no aggression in them, just tiredness and a quiet kind of hope. They sat down. Laura activated her translation device, a small box she had built herself from reverse-engineered buoy technology. It hummed softly and projected a thin screen of light between them. Tarek spoke first, as protocol demanded. "I am Senior Envoy Tarek of the Solari Dominion, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. I am here to determine the nature and intent of your presence beyond the quarantine zone." Laura translated, and Danny listened. Then he spoke plainly. "I am Captain Danny Voss of the United Earth Navy. These are my officers, Commander Katie Lang and Dr. Laura Finch. We are here because we have no choice." Tarek's 4 eyes blinked. "Explain." Danny looked at Laura, who nodded. He turned back to Tarek and told him the truth. "Our sun is dying. Not in the way that stars normally die, slowly over billions of years. Our scientists believe the sun has entered an accelerated expansion phase. Within 100 years, maybe less, Earth will be uninhabitable. The inner planets will be swallowed. Everything we have built in our home system will be gone." He paused and let the words settle. "We have colonies and other systems inside the quarantine zone, but most of those systems orbit similar stars. The same thing will happen to them eventually. We need to find new worlds, stable worlds, outside the barrier. That is why we broke through." Tarek sat very still. This was not what he had expected. He had prepared for threats, demands, and displays of power. He had not prepared for a dying species asking for help. "You understand," Tarek said carefully, "that the quarantine zone was established because your species was deemed too dangerous to exist alongside others." Danny nodded. "We know. We found the buoys. We read the warnings. We know what you think of us. And you broke through the barrier anyway." "Yes." "Why not send a message first? Why bring a fleet?" Danny leaned forward slightly. We did send messages. For over 2,000 years, we broadcast signals through the barrier asking for contact. Nobody answered. Either nobody heard us, or nobody wanted to. Tarek said nothing. He knew, because the council records confirmed it, that no one had monitored the quarantine barrier for thousands of years. The signals would have gone unheard. Danny continued. We brought the fleet because we did not know what was on the other side. We did not know if we would be greeted or attacked. We hoped for the first. We prepared for the second. That is just common sense. Tarek studied the human captain for a long moment. Then, he asked the question that he knew the entire council was waiting to hear answered. What do you want? A place to live. That is all. We are not here to take anything from anyone. We are not here to conquer. We are here because our home is dying, and we would rather ask for help than die in silence behind your wall. The room was quiet. Katie Lang watched Tarek's face, looking for any sign of threat. Laura Finch held her breath. Tarek slowly reached for his communicator and began composing his preliminary report to the council. His hands, Danny noticed, were shaking slightly. That evening, High Chancellor Vorath stood before the full assembly and read Tarek's report aloud. The chamber listened in complete silence. When he reached the end, he read Danny's final words exactly as Tarek had recorded them. We are not here to conquer. We are here because our home is dying, and we would rather ask for help than die in silence behind your wall. No one spoke for a very long time. Councillor Drea wiped something from her eye that might have been a tear. Ambassador Lytique sat rigid in his seat. His mandibles locked tight, his compound eyes betraying nothing. High Chancellor Vorath set down the report and looked out at the assembly. We need to make a decision, he said. And for the first time in 10,000 years, we need to make the right one. The Galactic Council demanded answers. They wanted to know what had happened behind the wall. 10,000 years was a long time, and the species they had locked away had clearly not died out as some had quietly hoped. So the council requested a full accounting of human history, from the day the barrier went up to the moment it came down. Dr. Laura Finch delivered the presentation from a converted cargo bay on the Resolute. The room had been cleared of crates and fitted with a long-range transmitter that sent a live feed directly to the council chamber on the Cradle of Law. Laura stood in front of a simple display screen, her hands clasped in front of her, and spoke to an audience of hundreds of alien beings she could not see. She began at the beginning. When you sealed us in, she said, we did not know why. We did not know who you were. All we knew was that one day a wall of energy appeared at the edge of our reach. We sent probes. We sent signals. We sent everything we had. Nothing came back. We were alone. She paused and let the translation systems carry her words across the chamber. The first 1,000 years were the worst. Without the knowledge that others existed, without any hope of contact, we turned inward. Nations fought nations. Weapons grew more powerful. In the year we count as 3100, a global war broke out on Earth that killed 4 billion people in less than a decade. Our population dropped to under 500 million. Our cities were ash. Our oceans were poisoned. We nearly ended ourselves. The council delegates listened in silence. A few shifted uncomfortably. The Mora Councillor Drea closed her eyes. But we did not end, Laura continued. We rebuilt. It took centuries, but we rebuilt. New cities rose from the ruins. New governments formed. New children were born who had never seen war and swore they would never allow it again. And for a while, they kept that promise. She brought up a timeline on the display screen. It showed 6 peaks and 6 valleys, 6 rises and 6 falls, spread across 10,000 years. This happened 6 times, Laura said, her voice steady but heavy. 6 times we built ourselves up. 6 times we tore ourselves down. War, famine, plague, collapse. And 6 times we started over. Every time we came back, we were a little wiser, a little more united, a little harder to kill. She moved to the next section of her presentation. The screen showed images of human colonies, space stations, and ships. We colonized our solar system within the first millennium. Mars, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, the asteroid belt. We learned to live in places that were not meant for life. By the third millennium, we had developed faster-than-light travel. She let that statement hang in the air. She knew it would cause a reaction, and it did. A low murmur rippled through the council chamber. Faster-than-light travel was common among council species, but they all used the same method, gravitational corridor networks that bent space along natural pathways. The idea that humans had developed their own independent method was startling. Your civilization uses gravity corridors, Laura said. We do not have access to those. Instead, our engineers developed what we call fold space drives. They compress the fabric of space itself, folding the distance between 2 points into almost nothing. Your scientists considered this approach impossible. Too much energy, too many variables, too much risk. Our engineers agreed with all of those assessments. Then they built it anyway. In the council chamber, several scientists from different species began talking rapidly to each other. The Cellari chief physicist looked like someone had hit him in the face. By the 5th millennium, we had spread across dozens of star systems within our quarantined space. We built worlds. We terraformed dead planets and turned them green. We filled empty systems with life. She paused. But we never found anyone else. In all those thousands of years, in all those systems, we never found another intelligent species. We were completely alone. Her voice changed here. It became quieter, more personal. You must understand what that does to a people. 10,000 years of silence. 10,000 years of shouting into the dark and hearing nothing back. It shaped us in ways that are hard to explain. We became very close to each other. Families grew tighter. Communities grew stronger. We developed a fierce loyalty to our own kind because there was no one else. We filled the silence with art and music and stories because the alternative was despair. She showed images from human worlds. Concert halls carved into mountainsides. Libraries that stretched for kilometers. Murals painted across the hulls of ships. Sculptures standing in the plazas of colony cities. Gardens growing on space stations. We are not just soldiers, Laura said. We never were. We are painters and poets and farmers and teachers. We sing to our children at night. We plant trees we will never sit under. We write letters to people who died 1,000 years ago because we do not want them to be forgotten. Then her tone shifted again, harder now. But we also knew that someone had locked us away. We did not know who or why, but we knew the wall was not natural. We knew that someone out there had decided we were too dangerous to exist alongside them. And so, while we painted and sang and planted our gardens, we also prepared. Every generation trained for the possibility that one day the wall would come down, either because we brought it down or because whoever built it came through to finish what they started. She showed images of human warships, training exercises, weapon systems. Our military technology advanced steadily. We developed kinetic weapons that can punch through almost any known material. We built directed energy systems. We created self-repairing hull plating. And we developed augmentation programs for our soldiers. Enhancements to speed, strength, and endurance that push the limits of what a human body can do. The council chamber was very quiet now. Laura took a breath. I am telling you this not as a threat. I am telling you this because you asked for the truth, and you deserve it. We are not helpless, and we are not naive. But we are also not monsters. Everything we built because we were afraid. And now that we are here, standing on the other side of your wall for the first time, we would very much like to stop being afraid. She ended her presentation, and the feed went dark. In the silence that followed, something else was happening. Deep in the archives beneath the cradle of law, a young Mora researcher named Teo was pulling files. Teo had been assigned to compile background material on the quarantine for the Council's deliberations, and he was thorough in a way that annoyed his supervisors. He did not just read the summary files, he dug into the raw data, the original documents, the unedited records from 10,000 years ago. What he found made him sick. The official record stated that the quarantine vote had been unanimous. Every species in the Council had agreed that Species 401 was too dangerous to be left free. But the raw voting records told a different story. 7 smaller species had voted against the quarantine. They had argued that sealing away an entire species based on fear was wrong, that it violated the Council's own founding principles. Their objections had been formally recorded, and then erased. Teo traced the deletion back to a single source, the Vrith Collective, the same species that had pushed hardest for the quarantine, the same species whose ambassador was now demanding that the humans be pushed back behind the wall. Teo kept digging. He found military records buried under layers of classification. Records of a Vrith operation that predated the quarantine by 50 years. An invasion fleet of 300 warships sent to Earth with orders to subjugate the primitive human civilization and claim their planet as a Vrith colony. The humans at that time had barely reached their own moon. They had crude nuclear weapons, simple chemical rockets, and nothing that could stand against a Vrith warship. The Vrith expected the operation to last less than a cycle. It lasted 3 years. The humans fought with everything they had. They launched nuclear weapons at the Vrith ships from the surface. They rammed their primitive spacecraft into Vrith cruisers. They fought on the ground with guns and explosives, and when those ran out, with their bare hands. By the time the Vrith withdrew, 90 of their 300 ships were destroyed or too damaged to fly. The humans had suffered terrible losses, but they had not surrendered. Not once. Not ever. The Vrith had buried the entire operation. They had classified the records, deleted the evidence, and then pushed the Council to quarantine the humans, framing it as a matter of galactic safety. The truth was simpler and uglier. The Vrith were ashamed. They had been beaten by a species that was supposed to be primitive, and they could not allow anyone to know. Teo compiled his findings into a report and sent it directly to Councillor Drea. Within hours, Drea brought it to the Council floor. The reaction was immediate. Delegates from a dozen species demanded explanations. Ambassador Lytique rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking furiously. "These are fabricated documents," he said. "Forgeries planted to undermine the Vrith Collective at a critical moment." "They are from your own archives," Drea replied calmly. "Sealed by Vrith Military Command. Verified by 3 independent authentication systems." Lytique said nothing. His compound eyes darted across the chamber, looking for allies. He found very few. High Chancellor Vorath called a recess. The chamber emptied slowly, delegates whispering to each other in clusters. On the Resolute, Danny Voss received a private message from Envoy Tarek. The message was brief. "The Vrith are cornered. Cornered animals are dangerous. Prepare your people." Danny read the message twice. Then he called Katie Lang and told her to begin quiet defensive preparations across the fleet. No alarms, no announcements, just readiness. A young engineer named Ryan Sosa worked through the night in the Resolute's engineering bay, calibrating the fleet's shield systems against the energy weapon frequencies they had recorded from the Council's probe. Ryan was 26 years old, thin and tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He had not slept in 2 days, but he kept working because that was what humans did. When the job mattered, you did not stop. Late that night, Laura Finch sat alone in her small quarters on the Resolute. She held a photograph in her hands. A real photograph printed on real paper. It showed Earth from orbit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in slow patterns over the surface. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and it was dying. She pressed the photograph against her chest and closed her eyes. She whispered into the silence of her room, to no one in particular, "I hope we did not come all this way just to fight another war." Outside her window, the stars of the open galaxy burned cold and bright, and somewhere among them, warships were already beginning to move. Ambassador Lytique sat alone in his private quarters on the Cradle of Law, his compound eyes fixed on a communication screen. The revelation of the Vrith invasion records had changed everything. The other delegates were turning against him. Whispers followed him through the corridors. Counselor Drea's formal inquiry would tear open every classified file in the Vrith archives. And what was hidden inside those files would destroy the Vrith collective's standing in the council for generations. Lytique could not allow that. He would not allow that. He opened a secure channel to the Vrith military command, far away in Vrith home space. The face of Fleet Admiral Korsek appeared on the screen, cold and angular, with black compound eyes that reflected no light. "The situation is no longer manageable through diplomacy," Lytique said. "The humans must be eliminated before the Council votes to dissolve the quarantine. If they are destroyed, the evidence dies with them. We control the narrative." Korsek was silent for a moment. "You are asking me to commit an act of war without Council authorization." "I am asking you to protect the Vrith Collective," Lytique replied. "Send a strike fleet. Call it a border security exercise. No one will question it until it is already done." Korsek considered this. Then he nodded. 60 ships. Commander Skrith will lead. He is efficient." "Good. Make it fast." The channel closed. Lytique sat back in his chair and breathed slowly. It was a risk, a massive risk, but the alternative was worse. If the truth about the original invasion came out fully, if the Council learned the full extent of what the Vrith had done and hidden, the collective would be ruined. Better to burn the evidence and blame the humans for the violence. Far away, 60 Vrith warships detached from the home fleet and began moving toward the quarantine zone at maximum speed. They traveled through gravitational corridors, crossing vast distances in hours. Commander Skrith stood on the bridge of his flagship, a sleek and heavily armed cruiser called the Silent Edge. Skrith was a veteran of 40 years of military service. He had fought border wars and pirate fleets and had never lost an engagement. He had read the ancient files on Species 401, but he considered them outdated and exaggerated. Whatever the humans had been 10,000 years ago, they could not possibly stand against modern Vrith warships. The Solari Third Armada detected the Vrith movement almost immediately. General Harik, commanding from his flagship, reported the development to High Chancellor Vorath through an encrypted channel. 60 Vrith warships moving at combat speed toward the human position. Harik said, "This is not a border exercise. This is a strike force." He sent a formal warning to the Vrith delegation on the Cradle of Law, demanding an immediate explanation and recall of the fleet. Lytique responded that it was a routine patrol and that the Chancellor was overreacting. Vorath did not believe him, but he did not yet have the authority to order the Solari military to intervene in what was technically a Vrith internal operation. "Shadow them," Vorath ordered Harik. "Stay within weapons range. Do not engage unless fired upon. And document everything." On the Resolute, Sam Ortiz was the first to see them. His sensor display lit up with 60 new contacts, moving fast and closing the distance. "Captain," Sam said, his voice tight, "I have inbound contacts, 60 ships, military configuration. They matched the energy signatures of the species that sent the probe. But these are not the same class. These are bigger. Much bigger. Danny Voss stood up from his command chair. The bridge went quiet. Every officer looked at him. "Time to contact?" Danny asked. 4 hours at their current speed. Danny nodded. "Get me all ship captains on a fleet channel, now." Within minutes, Danny was speaking to every captain in the human fleet. He laid out the situation plainly. 60 alien warships were approaching. Their intent was unknown, but their speed and formation suggested hostility. Danny gave the order to form the Iron Circle, a defensive configuration where every ship arranged itself in a tight sphere with overlapping fields of fire. Every ship covered the blind spots of its neighbors. Nothing could approach from any direction without facing concentrated resistance. He then turned to Katie Lang. "How are your injuries from the shuttle bay accident last week?" Katie flexed her left hand, which still ached from a heavy panel that had fallen on it during a maintenance drill. "I am fine, Captain." "I need you at tactical." Katie took her station and began coordinating with the fleet. Ryan Sosa called up from engineering to report that the shield modifications he had calibrated against alien energy weapons were holding steady in simulations. He said he had also rigged several countermeasures, things he had cobbled together from the data they had pulled from the Council's probe. "They are not perfect," Ryan admitted, "but they should buy us a few extra seconds per hit." "A few extra seconds is all we have ever needed," Danny replied. When the Vrith fleet dropped out of their gravitational corridor and saw the human formation, Commander Skrith paused. The Iron Circle was tight, disciplined, and covered from every angle. It was not the formation of a panicked or disorganized enemy. It was the formation of a species that knew exactly how to fight. Danny opened a broadcast on all frequencies. His voice was calm and steady. "This is Captain Danny Voss of the United Earth Navy, addressing the approaching fleet. We are not hostile. We will not fire unless fired upon. If you wish to talk, we will talk. If you wish to leave, we will let you leave. But if you attack us, we will defend ourselves with everything we have. Choose carefully." Skrith received the message. He hesitated. Something in the human captain's voice made him uncomfortable. It was not a bluff. It was not bravado. It was the voice of a man stating a simple fact. But Skrith had his orders. Letik had been very clear. The humans were to be destroyed. "All ships open fire," Skrith commanded. The first volley was massive. 60 Vrith warships fired simultaneously, sending beams of concentrated energy tearing across the gap between the two fleets. The beams slammed into the outer ring of human ships. Shields flared white and orange, buckling under the force. Alarms sounded. A conduit burst on the lower deck, sending sparks cascading across the floor. But the shields held. "Return fire," Danny said. The human fleet answered. Kinetic rounds, heavy slugs of dense metal accelerated to tremendous speed, launched from every ship in the formation. They crossed the gap in seconds and struck the Vrith ships with devastating force. Vrith armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, cracked and shattered under the physical impact. 2 Vrith ships lost their engine sections in the first exchange. A third broke apart entirely, its hull torn open like paper. Skrith was shocked. His ships were faster and more advanced, but the human weapons were brutal in their simplicity. They did not try to overload shields or disrupt systems. They just hit things very hard, and they did not miss. The battle closed to short range. Vrith ships darted and weaved, trying to use their speed to find gaps in the Iron Circle. But the human formation was seamless. Every time a Vrith ship found an angle of attack, 2 human ships were already there, waiting with loaded weapons. On the bridge of the Resolute, a direct hit from a Vrith beam cut through the upper hull and struck the forward section of the bridge. The impact killed 2 crew members instantly, a young weapons officer named Chris Daly and a communications technician named Maria Santos. Katie Lang was thrown sideways and slammed into a support column. She felt something crack in her shoulder. Pain shot down her arm, but she pulled herself back to her station and kept working. Leo Park took a piece of shrapnel above his right eye. Blood ran down the side of his face and dripped onto his console. He wiped it away with his sleeve and kept tracking enemy positions. Danny stood in the center of the bridge, steady as stone. Around him, his ship was shaking and burning and bleeding. But he did not flinch. He gave orders in a calm, clear voice, directing fire, adjusting formation, coordinating the fleet with the precision of a man who had trained for this his entire life. 15 minutes into the battle, 18 Vrith ships were destroyed or crippled. The human fleet had lost 3 ships, all of them badly damaged, but with their crews still fighting, from whatever systems remained operational. One human corvette, the Steadfast, had lost its entire weapons array and was using its armored hull to physically block shots meant for the ship behind it. Its captain, a woman named Jenny Marsh, had ordered her crew to strap in and hold on, while she flew her broken ship like a shield. Skrith watched his fleet falling apart. He had underestimated them. The ancient files were not exaggerated. They were, if anything, understated. These humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They did not retreat. When one of their ships was crippled, the others closed ranks around it and fought harder. All ships retreat, Skrith ordered. Fall back to the corridor entry point. But Danny had anticipated this. 3 fast attack ships, led by a captain named Pete Collins, had slipped out of formation during the chaos and positioned themselves directly behind the Vrith escape route. The retreating Vrith ships found their path blocked. Skrith was surrounded. His fleet was broken, and there was nowhere to go. Then Danny did the one thing Skrith never expected. He opened a channel. "Commander, this is Captain Voss. The fighting can stop right now. No more of your people need to die today. No more of mine either. I am offering you terms. Stand down your weapons. Transmit a full recording of who gave you the order to attack us. Do that, and your surviving crews go home alive." Skrith stared at his screen. The human captain's face was bruised and covered in dust. Behind him, the bridge was filled with smoke and sparking wires. But his eyes were calm. He was not gloating. He was not angry. He was just tired, and he wanted the killing to stop. Skrith lowered his head. "Transmitting now," he said. The recording went out on every open channel. Lytik's voice, clear and unmistakable, ordering the destruction of the human fleet. The entire galaxy heard it. The Solari Third Armada, which had watched the entire battle without firing a single shot, sent one message to the Cradle of Law. Species 401 engaged a superior Vrith force and won decisively. They then offered mercy to the defeated enemy. Recommend immediate diplomatic engagement. Do not provoke. On the Cradle of Law, the battle footage played on every screen. The Council watched humans fight and bleed and die, and then watched them reach out a hand to the enemy that had tried to kill them. Counselor Drea stood. Her voice was not soft this time. It was strong. These are not monsters. These are people, scarred and tired and far from home. And they chose mercy when they had every right to choose vengeance. We owe them better than what we have given them. The chamber was silent. On the battered bridge of the Resolute, Katie Lang stood beside Danny with her arm in a makeshift sling made from a torn uniform jacket. She looked out at the wreckage drifting in the dark, human and Vrith ships alike, broken and still. "Do you think it worked?" she asked. Danny watched the stars. "I do not know," he said quietly, "but I would rather be remembered for the hand I reached out than the fist I threw." Katie nodded. She did not say anything else. There was nothing else to say. Outside, the silence of space settled over the wreckage like a blanket, and somewhere far away, the Galactic Council began to change its mind. The days after the battle moved quickly. Commander Skrith's transmitted confession spread across every communication network in the galaxy. Lytik's voice, calm and precise, ordering the destruction of the human fleet without council authorization, played on loop in news feeds from one end of known space to the other. There was no denying it, no explaining it away, no hiding behind diplomatic language. The Galactic Council moved with unusual speed. A formal censure was passed against the Vrith Collective by an overwhelming majority. Ambassador Lytique was stripped of his diplomatic status and placed under arrest on the cradle of law. He was to be sent back to Vrith space to face judgment by his own government, though many delegates doubted the Vrith would punish him as severely as he deserved. The Vrith military was ordered to withdraw all ships from the region surrounding the former quarantine zone, and a joint investigation was launched into the original quarantine vote and the buried records of the failed Vrith invasion of Earth. The Vrith delegation sat in silence through the proceedings. Their compound eyes gave away nothing, but their stillness said everything. They had gambled and lost, and the cost was going to follow them for a very long time. With the Vrith neutralized, the path forward became clear. High Chancellor Vorath stood before the assembly and made an announcement that no one in 10,000 years of galactic history had ever expected to hear. I am formally inviting a representative of Species 401 of the human race to address this council. The chamber erupted into noise. Some delegates protested. Many more simply sat in stunned silence. But Vorath held firm. They have earned the right to be heard. We owe them at least that much. On the Resolute, Danny Voss received the invitation. He read it twice, sitting at the small desk in his quarters with the overhead light casting a warm glow on his tired face. Katie Lang stood in the doorway, her arms still in a sling. "They want me to speak to the whole council," Danny said. "Are you surprised?" "A little. I am a ship captain, Katie. I am not a diplomat." Katie almost smiled. "You talked an enemy commander into surrendering in the middle of a battle. I think you will manage." Danny put on his best uniform, the dark blue dress jacket with the United Earth Navy insignia on the chest. He ran his hand over the scar on his jaw and looked at himself in the small mirror bolted to the wall. He looked old. He felt old. But the eyes that looked back at him were steady, and that was enough. He boarded a small shuttle, along with Katie, Dr. Laura Finch, and a 4-person honor guard. The shuttle crossed the distance to the cradle of law in under an hour, and docked at a receiving bay near the council amphitheater. The moment they stepped off the shuttle, Danny felt the weight of attention. The station was enormous, larger than anything humans had ever built, with soaring corridors and walls made of materials that seemed to shift color in the light. But it was the people that struck him. Aliens of every kind stood along the corridors, watching the human delegation pass. Some were tall and thin, some were short and round, some floated, some crawled, some had shapes that Danny could not have described if he tried. They all stared. A small being, no taller than Danny's waist, with soft fur and wide dark eyes, reached out and touched Danny's hand as he walked past. Danny looked down. The creature flinched and pulled back. Danny knelt, bringing himself to eye level, and gently held out his hand, palm open. The small being hesitated, then reached out again and placed its tiny hand in Danny's. It held on for just a moment, then let go and disappeared into the crowd. Katie watched the exchange and said nothing, but her eyes were bright. The delegation entered the amphitheater. It was vast, a circular chamber that rose upward in tiers, filled with hundreds of alien delegates. The light was soft and blue, and the air carried a faint hum from the translation systems that allowed every species to understand every word spoken. At the center of the chamber was a raised platform with a single podium. Danny walked to the podium alone. Katie, Laura, and the honor guard took positions at the base of the platform. Danny placed his hands on the podium and looked out at the assembly. Hundreds of faces, none of them human, all of them watching him. He did not give a grand speech. He did not raise his voice or use dramatic pauses. He spoke the way a tired man speaks when he has something important to say and wants to make sure he says it right. We sailed across oceans, and then we sailed across space. We lost people we loved. We raised children. We wrote songs and painted pictures, and told stories around fires on worlds that had never known fire before. His voice was steady, but there was something raw underneath it, something that came from a place deeper than words. We were alone for 10,000 years. Do you know what that feels like? To look up at the sky every night and know that there is nobody out there who even remembers you exist? We sent signals through your wall for over 2,000 years. We begged for someone to answer. No one ever did. The chamber was completely silent. We are not perfect. We have never claimed to be. We are loud and stubborn and emotional. We hold grudges and we make mistakes. But we are also kind, and we are loyal, and we are brave. We have fought our way through 10,000 years of darkness, and we are still here. We are still standing. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. Our sun is dying. Our homeworld, the place where our species was born, the place where we took our first steps, and spoke our first words, and buried our first dead, will be gone within a century. We cannot save it. We have tried. So we broke through your wall, not because we wanted to conquer or destroy, but because we wanted to live. That is all we have ever wanted. Just to live. He gripped the podium tightly. I am not asking for charity. We have technology, medicine, science, and knowledge that we are willing to share. We have 10,000 years of experience surviving in conditions that would have broken most species. We have something to offer. All I am asking for is a chance, a place where we can live in peace, under an open sky, among neighbors, instead of behind a wall. He stopped. He had said everything he had come to say. He stepped back from the podium and stood still, waiting. The silence lasted a long time. Then Counselor Drea stood. Her blue-green skin shimmered under the chamber lights, and her voice carried clearly to every corner of the room. I move that the quarantine zone be dissolved permanently, and that the human species be offered provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full rights to settle unclaimed worlds and participate in council affairs. A Solari delegate stood and seconded the motion, then a Mora delegate, then another, and another. 11 species added their voices within minutes. The vote was called. The motion passed with an overwhelming majority. The Vrith and a small handful of their allies voted against it. Everyone else voted in favor. Danny Voss stood on the platform and heard the result. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, they were wet. Katie Lang, standing at the base of the platform, reached up and squeezed his hand. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to change. The human fleet was escorted to a region of unclaimed space with 17 habitable worlds spread across 5 star systems. Engineers and colonists from Earth and the quarantined colonies began arriving in transport ships. Hundreds of thousands of people carrying seeds and tools and blueprints and photographs of the homes they had left behind. Dr. Laura Finch established the first joint human-alien academic exchange program, working alongside the Mora archivist, Teo. Together, they began compiling a true and complete history of the quarantine, the invasion, and everything that had been hidden. Laura told Teo that the truth was the only foundation worth building on, and Teo agreed. Ryan Sosa, the young engineer who had spent sleepless nights calibrating shields, was recruited by a Solari engineering guild. They were fascinated by human fold space technology and wanted to understand how a species had brute-forced its way past a theoretical impossibility. Ryan became the first human to hold a position in an alien institution. He sent a message home to his parents on Earth that read, "I have a new job. The commute is about 4,000 light-years. The cafeteria food is strange, but not bad. Katie Lang took permanent command of the Resolute and led the first combined human-Solari patrol along the border of the new human territories. She ran a tight ship, but her crew noticed that she smiled more often than she used to. Danny Voss accepted the role of Earth's first permanent ambassador to the Galactic Council. He moved into quarters on the Cradle of Law and hung his daughter's drawing, the one of a house on a green hill under a yellow sun, on the wall next to his desk. Senior Envoy Tarek visited Danny in his new quarters one evening. They sat across from each other, sharing a drink that Danny had brought from Earth, something called whiskey that Tarek found alarmingly strong but strangely pleasant. "When I first came aboard your ship," Tarek said, "I expected to find monsters. My files told me you were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. I expected weapons and hostility and cold metal walls." He paused. "Instead, I found people who painted sunsets on the inside of their warships." Danny smiled. "We are a complicated species." "You are," Tarek agreed. "In all my years of diplomacy, across all the species I've spoken with, I have never been more wrong about anything. And I have never been happier to be wrong." Danny raised his glass in return. "We have a saying where I come from. Never judge someone by the cage they were put in. Judge them by what they built inside it." Tarek considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That is a very good saying." They drank in comfortable silence as the lights of the Cradle of Law glowed around them. Years passed. Colonies grew. New cities rose on new worlds under alien skies. Humans and aliens learned each other's languages, shared each other's food, argued about each other's music. It was not always easy. There were misunderstandings and disagreements and moments of friction. But there was also wonder and laughter and the slow, steady building of trust. On a warm evening on the surface of one of the new worlds, a young girl stood in a field of tall grass and looked up at the sky. The stars were different here, arranged in patterns she did not recognize. Her mother, a colonist named Beth Calloway, knelt beside her and pointed to a faint light near the horizon. "Do you see that light?" Beth said. "That is Sol. That is our old sun. It is very far away." The girl looked at the tiny point of light. "Will we ever go back?" Beth smiled softly and brushed the hair from her daughter's face. "No, sweetheart, but it will always be home in our hearts." Above them, ships from a dozen different species crossed the sky, their trails of light stitching the darkness together like threads in a quilt. Somewhere among them, a battered old warship, called the Resolute, made its way back from a patrol. Its hull was still scarred from battles old and new. Its corridors still carried the murals its crew had painted, green valleys and blue oceans and golden sunsets from a world that was slowly dying 4,000 light-years away. But the people inside were alive. Not anymore. The galaxy stretched out above the girl in the grass, vast and full of voices. And for the first time in 10,000 years, some of those voices were human. The great amphitheater on the station known as the Cradle of Law was full. Hundreds of alien delegates sat in their curved seats, arranged in rising circles around a central platform. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and the faint chemical traces of a dozen different species breathing in the same room. Lights floated above the chamber like small moons, casting a pale blue glow over everything. Nobody was talking. That alone was unusual. The Galactic Council was never quiet. High Chancellor Vorath stood at the central platform. He was old, even by Solari standards, and his gray skin hung loose over his tall frame. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he read the report glowing on the screen before him. He read it twice, to make sure he was not mistaken. Then, he looked up at the assembly and spoke in a voice that carried no emotion, because emotion would have caused panic. A long-range sensor grid at the edge of the outer rim has detected multiple energy signatures emerging from the quarantine zone, he said. The signatures are consistent with powered vessels. They are moving outward. The silence broke. It broke the way glass breaks, all at once and in every direction. Delegates shouted. Some stood. A few made sounds that had no translation in any known language, but clearly meant fear. The quarantine zone. Every species in the galaxy knew the name, even if most had forgotten the reason behind it. 10,000 years ago, the Galactic Council had sealed off an entire arm of the galaxy. They had built a wall of energy barriers and automated warning buoys stretching across light years of open space. Behind that wall lived a species that the Council had judged too dangerous to ever be allowed out. Species 401. The files were ancient. The data was incomplete. But what remained was enough to make any sensible being uncomfortable. Species 401 had evolved on a world that should have killed them 100 times over. Their planet had extreme temperatures, violent weather, active volcanoes, and an atmosphere that was slowly poisoning them with oxygen. The surface was covered with predators, parasites, and diseases that mutated faster than medicine could track. And yet, Species 401 had not only survived, they had thrived. They had climbed to the top of their food chain not through speed or strength or venom, but through something far worse. They simply refused to stop. They chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They healed from injuries that would kill other species. They formed bonds with deadly animals and turned those animals into companions. And when they ran out of things to hunt, they turned on each other with a violence that horrified every scientist who studied them. The Council had made its decision 10,000 years ago. Lock them away. Forget about them. Let them burn themselves out in their little corner of the galaxy. But now, the wall was broken. And it had been broken from the inside. Far away at the edge of the shattered barrier, Captain Danny Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the last fragments of the energy wall dissolve into nothing around his ship. He was a tall man, with wide shoulders and a face that had seen too many bad days. A thick scar ran across his jaw from a fight he never talked about. His gray eyes were steady and calm, the way they always were when things were about to get dangerous. "Barrier is down, Captain," said Lieutenant Sam Ortiz from the Navigation Console. Sam was a quiet man, with dark hair and quick hands. He had guided the Resolute through asteroid fields and ambush lanes for 6 years, and his voice never changed, no matter how bad the situation was. "We are through." Danny nodded. He looked at the viewport. For the first time in 10,000 years, a human being was looking at the open galaxy. Stars stretched out in every direction, thick and bright and endless. Somewhere out there, other beings lived and breathed and built things. Somewhere out there was the civilization that had locked humanity away. "All ships hold position," Danny said into the fleet channel. "Form up on the Resolute. Defensive spread. Nobody moves until I say so." Behind the Resolute, 21 other ships slid into formation. They were not pretty ships. They were covered in thick armor plates, many of which had been welded on over older armor, that had been welded on over even older armor. Scorch marks and dents told stories of battles fought and survived. These ships had been built to take punishment and keep flying. That was the human way. You did not need to be the fastest or the most elegant. You just needed to be the one still standing when the dust cleared. Commander Katie Lang stepped up beside Danny. She was his first officer, a woman in her early 40s, with sharp brown eyes and dark hair pulled back tight. Katie had a talent for keeping people calm when everything around them was falling apart. She looked at the stars beyond the viewport and let out a slow breath. "So that is what the rest of the galaxy looks like," she said. "It is," Danny replied. "It is very big," she continued. It is, Danny said. Katie turned to him. What do we do now? Danny was quiet for a moment. He thought about Earth, about the science teams that said the sun was changing, that it was growing hotter and more unstable with every passing decade. He thought about the billions of people back home who were counting on this fleet to find them a future. He thought about his daughter, who was 7 years old and had drawn him a picture of a house on a green hill under a yellow sun before he left. He still had that picture folded in his jacket pocket. We introduce ourselves, he said. At the back of the bridge, Ensign Leo Park looked up from his communication console. Leo was 23 years old and had been on the Resolute for less than a year. His eyes were wide as he stared at his screen. Captain, Leo said, his voice cracking just slightly, I am picking up signals. Thousands of them. Alien signals. They are everywhere. The bridge crew went still. For 10,000 years, humanity had lived in silence. They had sent signals into the void and received nothing back. They had searched every star in their quarantined arm and found no one. They had been completely, crushingly alone. And now, suddenly, the universe was full of voices. Danny walked over to Leo's station and looked at the screen. Lines of data scrolled past, each one representing a different transmission on a different frequency. Music, speech, mathematics, navigation beacons, news broadcasts, the chatter of a living, breathing galaxy. Can you translate any of it? Danny asked. Not yet, Leo said. But Dr. Finch's linguistic team has been working on the buoy languages for years. Give me a few hours. Danny put a hand on Leo's shoulder. Take your time. Do it right. He walked back to the viewport and stood there, looking out. Katie joined him. They're going to be afraid of us, she said quietly. I know, Danny said. What if they shoot first? Danny did not answer right away. He watched the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien council was probably reading a 10,000-year-old file about how dangerous humans were. They were probably scared. He understood that. Fear made people do terrible things. He had seen it enough times in his own species. Then we survive, he said. That is what we do. Back on the cradle of law, the council session had descended into argument. Ambassador Lytique of the Vrith Collective, a tall insectoid creature with clicking mandibles and cold compound eyes, was on his feet, demanding action. Send the battle fleets now, Lytique said. Push them back behind the barrier, rebuild the wall. This is not a matter for discussion. Counselor Drea of the Mora Expanse raised a slender hand. She was an aquatic being, her blue-green skin glistening under the chamber lights. Her voice was soft, but carried clearly. We sealed them away 10,000 years ago based on fear, Drea said. Perhaps we should try something different this time. Perhaps we should talk to them. Lytique turned his compound eyes toward her. You do not talk to predators, Counselor. You contain them. High Chancellor Vorath raised both hands and silenced the chamber. He ordered a reconnaissance probe sent to the quarantine zone immediately. Then, he sent a private message to General Harik of the Solari military, ordering the Third Armada to move within striking range, just in case. As the session ended and delegates filed out, a Vrith intelligence officer sat alone in a data archive deep below the station. She had pulled up the original quarantine file, the full one, not the summary that most delegates had read. At the very end, buried under layers of classification seals, she found a note written by the scientist who had first studied humans 10,000 years ago. The note was short. It read, "They are not like us. They do not stop. They do not forget. And they are never as weak as they appear." The officer stared at the words for a long time. Then she closed the file and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the station around her, and wondered what was coming.